final season of Better Call Saul airing right now, I'm going back and reviewing each of the seasons leading up to the finale. We're in week 3. That means we're talking about season 3. Hi, my name is Sean, and I love to talk about movies and TV way too much. With that in mind, go ahead and join me down below in the comment section. Share your thoughts on Season 3 of Better Call Saul. This is a spoiler review, so feel free to spoil away down below in the comment section. And if you haven't watched the season yet, you have been warned. Also, I have reviewed the previous 2 seasons, and I will be reviewing the future seasons, and I've done other Breaking Bad verse content. You can check all of that out up in this playlist up here. And one final thing, I'm doing this review series along with my buddy Cody Leach. So each day on the same date, we are dropping our season reviews for Better Call Saul. So if you want a different person's perspective from mine, check out his reviews right up here. And let's get started with my general thoughts on the season. And for me, season 3 is where Better Call Saul really starts to kick into high gear. Because of the nature of the show as this prequel that's showing how Jimmy McGill as well as Mike went on their paths that led to the characters that we know from Breaking Bad, it took a little bit of time to kind of move all the pieces, set a couple things up, and develop them enough and compromise their morality enough to really start getting into the juicy parts of their journey. I think all along the way, the writing has been top-notch. But when it comes to kind of the more exciting sorts of stuff, the payoff, the big dramatic type stuff, you start to get a lot more of that in season 3 versus seasons 1 and 2, which were a lot of setup and a lot of each of them fighting their darker tendencies. And you really start seeing them embrace their darker side in season 3. And then also along those lines, Nacho, who's been kind of this character that's introduced for this show, but very much you see him taking bigger, bolder actions, his own sorts of plans, and getting more and more intertwined in this messy world that he's kind of trying to get out of. And then each of their worlds are combining. So for me, of the first 3 seasons, I think this one is the best of the bunch. I think it moves quicker. And even rewatching it, because I watched it for the first time last year, rewatching it, I didn't realize how early certain events happen. I mean, this season moves at a very quick pace, where all the stuff that goes down with Jimmy and Chuck, it's a very quick kind of descent of the breakdown of their relationship, the actual trial between the two of them, and then Chuck's ultimate fate and all the consequences for Jimmy. A lot happens in this season, and likewise with Mike and Nacho and Hector and the Chicken Man. A bunch of progress happens throughout this season. And so I just thought that they do all this setup in the first 2 seasons, and then you get to start to see some payoff, tragic payoff. It's not the fun type of payoff for the most part. It's the tragic kind, and you finally see it here. With that said, let's start breaking down individual plot lines, character arcs. We'll kick things off with Jimmy versus Chuck. So at the very end of the last season, or in the last little arc of the last season, Jimmy messed with some documents that caused Chuck to be embarrassed publicly as well as lose a client, and it was all because Jimmy violated the law. Chuck, knowing who his brother is, immediately was able to figure out what was happening, and it leads to this whole back and forth between the two of them, and in the end, Chuck concocts this master plan basically to trick Jimmy into confessing, which he does, and Chuck records. And so this season kicks off right after that event. And you have this little moment following right after that scene that we saw at the end of the previous one, where Jimmy comes back in and starts helping Chuck pull down all of the space blankets and everything and put his house back together now that he's decided not to retire and he's in a better emotional state. And they have a little bit of a brother moment. And eventually, Chuck snaps out of him. He goes, I'm not going to forget what you just said. Like, there's going to be consequences. Jimmy leaves, and one of the most heartbreaking lines is said to Kim Wexler right after that. And I wrote it down exactly because I was just like, as it was said, I was like, oh, that's so brutal. Jimmy says to Kim, for 10 minutes today, Chuck didn't hate me. I forgot what that felt like. And that is so much the tragedy of the first half of this show, where you have two brothers that are just so unbelievably different from one another. Two brothers that their skill sets are very different. Their morality is so different. Their strengths, their weaknesses, they're so opposites, but they're still brothers. And in particular with Jimmy, who has such a compromised moral compass. But the show starts off with showing him at this point in time in life where every day he's taking such good care of his brother while trying to build up this whole firm. And he's trying to make his brother proud, only to kind of get to a point in time where you realize his brother was never going to be proud of him. His brother will always view him as a sleazy dirtbag that's trying to con the system and trying to cut corners and cheat. And because of that, it leads to this whole descent of their relationship. And so then you've had it, the whole season 2 is Jimmy's perspective is Chuck hates me. He hates me. Like we have no relationship. He just views me as the absolute worst, that I just betrayed him and I can never earn him back or his trust back. And I did all this. He just hates me. And they have this one little moment at the beginning of the season. It's like the one of these final moments between the two of them. It's a fun, positive, brotherly moment. And then it quickly ends. And Jimmy even realizes it in the moment. Like, wow, I forgot what it was like for Chuck not to hate me. The person that up to this point in time, Jimmy most wants to earn the respect of, that he decided to become a lawyer to make this brother proud. And that'll never happen. He will never be proud of him. He will never like him. It will never work. But for one little bit, he didn't hate him. And this kind of leads into the utter descent of their relationship and the ultimate tragedy is that the life of Chuck, where Chuck concocts this plan to feed information to Ernie that he knows he will feed back in some way back to Kim or back to Jimmy, and Jimmy will overreact. Chuck, for all of his faults, and as much as he doesn't know how to respond to Jimmy, he seems to have a very good grasp of who Jimmy is. He doesn't know how to properly guide him, coach him, lead him in a better direction, but he does know what Jimmy is up to. He does have a good read on how Jimmy will respond to things, and so he comes up with this plan, feeds information back to Jimmy. Jimmy learns that his brother recorded him. His brother lied to him about just trying to trick him into confessing. And Jimmy does what Jimmy does. He overreacts, kicks in Chuck's door, storms in to get the tape recorder, snaps it. He's rough with Chuck, but he's not going to hurt him. And right in the other room is Howard and the private investigator, which now Jimmy has committed crimes with 3 different witnesses and in a context where there's multiple people know that there was the importance of the act of destruction. It kind of sets up this whole course of Jimmy is arrested for this. You have a moment where Chuck's like, hey, I'm doing all of this because I love you. I'm doing all this because I want the best for you. And I'm going to be there for you to try and help you be your best version of yourself. He says all of this to Jimmy while Jimmy's sitting there on the curb. And it rings just as hollow to the audience as I'm sure as it does to Jimmy. I just said that as if Jimmy's a real person. But the line rings hollow. Like Chuck is the hammer. He's the discipline. But he hasn't been that person to try and help Jimmy be more than just the guy in the mailroom, which is so much the problem here. That if Chuck, and I said it in my last fuse, and I'll keep it like, well, I guess I won't say it after this because of where this season goes, but Chuck thinks of himself as helping his brother, but he won't do anything to actually help his brother's ambitions or any, like, you want to be a lawyer? Okay, stop trying to cut corners. Here's how to do it right. Let me bring you in. You're your one worst enemy, so let me be the person that can put the guardrails up, and let me help you use your skills, but within this, and let you be you. And it'll make me a little uncomfortable because I'm the by the book guy, and you're the guy that kind of bends the rules and is very outside the box. Let me try and help you as my. He never does that. Never does that. And so then when Jimmy's arrested, Chuck in that moment is like, hey, I'm gonna be there for you. I'm gonna help you. But he hasn't been the last several years, and he was the person standing in Jimmy's way, so it rings so hollow. This leads to some back and forth where Chuck doesn't actually want Jimmy to go to jail. Chuck wants Jimmy to lose, to be disbarred. That's what he wants. He wants to stop Jimmy from making a mockery of the thing that he values so much. And so then he works with the prosecuting attorney to try and change this, what exactly is going to take place. But the big problem is that because now Jimmy is signing this thing saying that, I don't know the legal terms for it, but the end result is that the bar is going to learn about what Jimmy did. And when you're a lawyer, you're not supposed to actually be a criminal yourself. And so he's very likely going to be disbarred. That leads to kind of this trial between the two of them. Kim decides to team up with Jimmy on this. And essentially they're trying to build the case of Chuck's out to get Jimmy and Jimmy was out to make his brother feel better. Which, as an audience member, it's strange the way the shows work. We were watching this show the whole time knowing, but Jimmy did destroy evidence. But Jimmy did talk to the documents. Like, on the one hand, we know Chuck is right. Chuck is totally right. Jimmy did all this stuff. He's guilty of all of it. But we're still rooting for Jimmy because he's the protagonist. And it's tough to root for Chuck because he's not doing anything positive to help his brother. He's doing all these negative things to hold his brother back. So it's just strange the way us as the audience react to the different natures of the characters, their motivations. And then there's this flip side to it that makes it even more complicated of everything that Jimmy is saying about Chuck in another sense is also true. It just doesn't change the fact that Jimmy's guilty. But Chuck is mentally not well. Chuck is out to get his brother. Chuck is acting in a paranoid manner where, in the one hand, he's right, but he's also has a crazy obsession to prove it that's unhealthy. So it's all these strange layers to it, in which case Jimmy knows how compromised Chuck actually is and leverages every weakness Chuck has and essentially to tear him down. So he calls in the ex-wife who Chuck refused to admit something was wrong with him. And so he leverages that against his brother, which one of the things that happens in this season is you just see Jimmy get way more cynical. He makes such a harsh, cynical turn where in the first two seasons, he does bad stuff, but it's normally with a good intentions, with a good heart. And then you see this season so much more cynicism in the choices that he makes, that he leverages an ex-wife against Chuck at a moment where he knows it will hurt both of them enormously. And then he concocts this whole scenario where he slips a phone with no battery, he slips a phone and no battery into Chuck's pocket. He has this whole scenario that he does that eventually proves in the room very clearly, this is 100% in his head. It is not physical. This is a guy with a mental problem, and his firm has been covering for him. Chuck's been lying about it, and Chuck has clearly is not all there the way that he should be. And at the end of all of it, Jimmy essentially wins. He gets a year where he can't practice law, but in terms of what should happen here, that's a slap on the wrist, given clearly this is a compromised person. And in the process, sets the stage for Chuck's ultimate demise of Chuck is a person whose pride is in his work and in his mind. And because of what Jimmy just did, he's outed the fact Chuck's mind's not all there and created the scenario where Chuck can never really practice law again. There's no hope for Chuck to get better. There's no reason there's no goal for Chuck to get better. And speaking of that cynicism, that night, the ex-wife shows up at Jimmy's place. Like that, you lied to me, but okay, you got to be the brother now. We got to go help him. And Jimmy will not do it. He's just, no, he's not my brother anymore. He betrayed me. He's going to betray me. He's going to burn bridges with me. I'm going to burn every bridge with him. Just like this very cynical Jimmy compared to the guy in season 1 who every day shows up as taking care of his brother that he knows isn't well, that he'll stay there overnight if his brother overdoes it and pass that, like he will do anything to take care of his brother, that now, after he just burned his brother's world to the ground, he won't even go see him to say, hey man, I'm sorry I had to do that, but like you recorded me, you betrayed me, like you did all this stuff just to tear me down. So yeah, I fought back the way that I had to. So you just see Jimmy become so much more cynical, building that bridge to who he is in Breaking Bad. Jimmy McGill, season 1, has a lot of sweetness to him. Season 3, he is just so bitter and cynical. And you have that battle between the two of them where he kind of wins and kind of loses and can't practice law for years, so it's not clear exactly what he's going to do about this. How is he going to make money, which leads to even more cynical Jimmy. And Chuck, realizing it's a mental thing, decides he's going to get better. But what is he trying to get better for? We'll come back to that later when we get to the final outcome of their arc, but let's move on to some of the other characters. And we'll go with Mike and the Chicken Man. And this is where the plot really starts to kind of pick up, and you start bridging that gap with Breaking Bad a lot more, because Gus becomes a significant player in this show, on a level to where he becomes more important to this show than he even was to Breaking Bad, because you only in, a couple seasons of Breaking Bad, and from here on out, he's a major player in Better Call Saul, and a major player in this underground world of drugs. And essentially, Mike has been out there trying to hurt the Salamancas because of his personal vendetta, and Gus, the Chicken Man, as we are well aware, is playing a very long game of revenge against the Salamancas because of what they did to his family and his brother. And so Mike, on the one hand, is working in the same direction as Gus, but Gus likes to make sure he's in control of exactly what's going on. Gus is playing 4D underwater chess. He's got a big master plan that he's working this whole empire, that he wants to make money, and he wants to get a lot of revenge. And anyone messing with it, he wants to make sure that we're playing that all right. So Mike and Gus end up kind of teaming up a little bit, where Gus is like, yeah, if you want to keep doing some stuff and interrupting their supply lines, yeah, go ahead and do that. Do you need a little bit of help doing that? And so through the course of this, they start this little partnership that leads to the relationship that you see when we get to Breaking Bad. And all kind of starts right here with the vendetta of Mike that goes back to the events that happened because of Nacho. So several things happen to where Mike finds a way to get the police paying attention to the Salamancas, particular Hector's supply lines, and so they start getting confiscated, in which case they change the rules around a little bit to where Hector is now getting his drugs from Gus, which Hector does not want to do, does not appreciate, and wants to find any other way around this. That starts setting in motion the other sides to this. Like it's when the writing of this gets so good, because it's everything that happens is a trickle down, and you can kind of just keep rewinding back. What happened in season 2, episode 4 matters for season 3, episode 7. And I don't even know what those 2 episodes are, but that's how well the show is developed, to where these choices have consequences. It has a trickle down, and they always find a way that they don't write themselves into a corner. They come up with some decision. They thought ahead, much like Gus. They too are playing 4D underwater chess, and they're planning ahead where everything's headed. And so all these choices lead to this scenario where Hector does not want to get his supply from the Chicken Man. He wants his own supply lines. So he's now going to leverage Nacho, in particular his father, to try and use his dad's company to try and smuggle drugs, which Nacho does not appreciate. His father is absolutely not in the game, absolutely is not compromised whatsoever, and wants nothing to do with it. And Nacho is like, oh crap, I do not want to bring my father into this. This is my mess, not his. And so he tries to talk with his dad. It goes nowhere. Hector shows up and starts putting money out, and his dad's like, I don't want that. And Nacho's like, hey, we got to make this work. And then as they're leaving, Hector's like, I don't trust your dad. Why didn't he take my money? Because Hector's the absolute worst. And it leads to this scenario where Nacho's like, I got to take this guy out. And several other things kind of happen in here where a series of events happen where Nacho realizes, I work for just terrible people. Guy comes in and doesn't have quite enough drug money. He says he'll make it up the next week. And they're like, go beat the crap out of that guy. Like, Nacho doesn't want to beat the crap out of the guy, but he has to. And then as they're doing these deals with Chicken Man, Hector's like, hey, just be sure, take an extra block of the drugses, since I know my drug language, of the drugses. So they go in and demand a sixth one, not just the 5 that they're supposed to do. So Gus's guys pull out guns pointed at Nacho's head, and Nacho doesn't seem to appreciate having a gun pointed at his head as all this takes place. And so like a series of things happen where he's like, man, this is a mess. Like this, like they're bringing my dad into it. I'm going to get killed. And they don't care. Like, they just don't care what I'm saying. They don't care about my life. They don't care about my father. They just care about their own little vendettas. So he hatches up this plan to swap out Hector's heart medicine with nothing. So it's like, okay, how do I do this in a way that he dies from a health complication? So no one's looking for the killer. No one's looking for the person that did this. He's got a serious heart condition. Swap out his pills. We can make this happen. And so this kind of leads into this other extended part to it where he goes back to the guy from end of season 1, beginning of season 2 that kind of brought Mike into this whole world. The goofy guy with the baseball cards works for the drug company. Say, hey, just give me these empty pills. And so because of that, that guy goes to Mike like, hey, can you help me with this deal again? Because I don't want bad things to happen, and it's Nacho, and what's going on? Mike immediately starts to figure out what's going on here. Wait, he wants heart pills. Hector has heart condition. I see what's happening here. So Mike is aware of Nacho's plan, and he's like, hey, man, if you do this, you got to switch the pills back. Here's what you got to do, how to not mess this up. But you're playing a dangerous game at this point in time. And there's other people you need to worry about. You have to think about the other people involved in this. And I even get into all the stuff about Mike tracking down Chicken Man with the trackers. And as this is happening, Mike checks Nacho's car to see if it's being tracked. Just all these other things are kind of going on in the season. That's where it gets exciting. There's so many more things I could talk about. But eventually it gets to the point in time, Nacho switches out the pills. And we move into the final little segment of the season where there's actually a meeting with Gus, Chicken Man. Things get heated, and Chicken Man has a heart problem. Pills don't do anything for him. Gus is the guy that runs over to try and save him. He kicks out other guy that does. We don't want to get caught in the middle of all of this. In the midst of it, also Nacho's able to switch everything. It's real clear, though. Gus knows that Nacho did this. Gus puts this together really, really quickly. And all this sets up the Hector Salamanca that we meet in Breaking Bad. The guy in the wheelchair that can't communicate, that's like this major player in that show, but it's a major player that doesn't talk. And now we see how that happened. It's like this guy that was super important, Nacho, that also sets up the fact that like Nacho's way too important to have not showed up in Breaking Bad. Well, he's not going to have a good fate on this show. Whatever's going to happen, whether he runs, whether he dies, man, this guy is way too important to just disappear. That'll lead us to our final stretch, the fall of Chuck and the bitterness of Jimmy. And a lot of stuff starts kind of taking place in here where Jimmy tries to get his law practice insurance pulled because he lost his license. And while he's there, he slips information to the lady about Chuck and his condition that causes her to go and read the transcripts that make it clear, that causes them to raise their premiums dramatically for HHM. Along these same lines, Jimmy is trying to get the Sandpiper settlement, so he starts like manipulating old ladies into disliking this other old lady to try and get them to settle early. It's like the nastiest stuff that Jimmy's ever done. That Jimmy is absolutely like lying to these old ladies and turning them against one of them just for his personal gain. Like, purely for his personal gain and what he's doing. And just like you're watching like, Jimmy, why? Oh, gross. And by the end of it, Jimmy realizes like, oh, she's lost all of her friends. Man, the only way to make this right is to make them hate me more than they hate her. Oh, crap. And so then he sets things right throughout all of this, through that process. But it's just cynical Jimmy. And Chuck's trying to get healthy. Chuck actually goes to the doctor. He gets all these practices. He starts going out. He starts trying to get healthy, and he's actually doing a pretty good job of it. But as things are getting better for him, at the same time, the law firm stuff is crumbling in as it's now public information that he's not well. And so eventually, Howard goes to him and says, Chuck, maybe it's time for you to retire. Maybe it's time for you to take a different position. Judgment seems compromised. Obviously, you've had your health issues. Maybe it's not the best time for you to be doing law. Chuck, being Chuck, responds like Chuck and decides to fight this. And he's going to sue HHM over this. And it's like the moment in the show where you go, oh, Chuck, what are you doing? Like, you realize that you're not well. You know that, like, that mentally you're not well. But what you can't do is own the consequences of that. That means that maybe it's time for you to figure out what's next. And what's next isn't that you're going to get back to what you were doing before. That ship has sailed. The way you handled this made that very unlikely. And the nature of your condition just makes that very difficult to do. So he's going to sue them, in which case Howard has this moment where he realizes he's been betrayed, like, by Chuck too. Like, wait, Chuck is going to sue the firm? He's going to tear the firm down rather than in any way work with me? He's not in any way trying to find a middle ground. He's suing. So Howard personally takes out a loan, has a meeting with Chuck where Chuck thinks that he just like, hey guys, let's put this all behind us. We're all good. We're all friends. We had a bad moment. The meeting ends and Howard clears the room, meets with Chuck, and he just pulls a check out of his pocket like, you win. You get your money. I had to take out a loan. It's my personal funds. You win. And you have this moment where like each of them are just like sitting there in like oh, what has happened? How did we get here that our friendship is gone, our relationship is gone, the trust is gone, our business, like this whole thing we've built has just been torn apart. And Chuck is like realizing, oh, they weren't kidding about all of this. And Chuck just like seems unable to fully grasp, fully absorb, suck in the fact that like he did this. Like he's in a bad shape. He hasn't worked with people in a reasonable way. Howard has actually been, Howard and even Jimmy have been bending over backwards to try and help Chuck this whole time. And he's burned the bridges with him. Now, Howard has his faults. Jimmy has many faults. But Chuck has burned every bridge. He has nothing left. And it's like, but he's got a check for millions of dollars. And nothing else. And you just have that moment of like the sinking in reality view what's taking place. Running parallel to this, there's this whole Mesa Verde plot line with Kim. And she's trying to keep their law firm afloat by herself since Jimmy can't practice law. And so she keeps saying yes to everything. She keeps like trying to overwork herself to make sure she's this miracle worker and keeps getting praised as this miracle worker. And overworks herself. And eventually you get to the point in time, there's so many things in here we could have gone down paths with Mesa Verde and Kim and her strengths and the complexity that is her and her faults, weaknesses. But essentially, she gets to a point in time where she just goes without sleep for a week trying to get everything done. Loads all this stuff into her vehicle and is going to go drive the files to file them, falls asleep while driving, and gets significantly injured. But it's much more of like that wake-up call of like, wait, I didn't die. I could have gone either way. Drove off the road asleep. All the files blew everywhere. I can't work anymore. My arm's busted. What am I doing? I can't do this. Why did I do this? How did we get here? And likewise for Jimmy, has that sweet side to him. You get a little bit of the sweetness here at the end of the season where he decides to make himself the bad guy to help the old ladies become friends again. And then you see him as this moment, he sees Kim all messed up and he's like, oh man, I don't want to lose all my these people that are mattered to me. So he goes to meet up with Chuck and make amends with him. And he's like, man, I messed up. I would have done things different. There's things that I said that I stand by, and you made mistakes. And I'm not saying that it was all me, but I just want to know that there's only so many of us McGills out there anymore, and we need to stick together. And Chuck, who just burned all of his bridges with HHM, with Howard, can't practice law anymore. Someone comes to him to make amends. And Chuck's response is, why do you want to make amends? Feel better? Like, hey, you're always going to be you, and I'm always going to be me. And the last line that Chuck says to Jimmy couldn't be worse. Couldn't be a more hurtful final line to say to Jimmy. It couldn't be a more perfect example of Chuck's own failure as a brother. Because, Jimmy, I don't mean to hurt your feelings, but you've never meant all that much to me. And with that, Jimmy leaves, and that's the end of it all for Chuck. And it's just such a perfect example of Chuck's ultimate failure. His pride, his ego, and of course he loves his brother, but he doesn't know how to love him in a way that in any way communicates it to his brother. He doesn't know how. He loves him as a family member, but he doesn't like him. He doesn't respect him. And he's a person that respect is such a high value for him, and honor and the law and properness. And Jimmy's none of those things. And so even as Chuck has nothing else except his $8 million that he's going to get from Howard, that's all he has. And in this moment, still burns a bridge with Jimmy. He can't even in that moment be like, I don't think we're ever going to see eye to eye, but I appreciate the gesture. I don't think we're going to have a relationship moving forward. There's too much damage, but I appreciate it. Let's let things, you go your way, I'm going to go my way. I really do appreciate it. He can't do that. He has to end on this note of, you've never meant anything to me. The brother that has spent the last several years getting him groceries, taking care of him, the brother that secretly went to law school to be like, hey, I'm going to be a lawyer like you. The little brother that's the classic little brother trying to mimic and mirror his older brother that he respects. What's the thing that he could say that could hurt him most? You've never meant all that much to me. Go their separate ways. And that night, Chuck has wakes up in the middle of the night, takes some pills, starts logging his health stuff, and just realizes what it's like his clicks in his brain, why am I doing any of this? Why does any of this matter? What? Why? And he just spirals out of control into the craziest version of his crazy. He just keeps on going through it. He becomes obsessed with stopping all power going to his house. And he can't figure out how to do it, so he just smashes his whole house, throws everything in the backyard, and then the season closes out with him sitting there with a lantern, with papers everywhere, him just kicking the desk till the lantern falls on the papers. And he kills himself. And it's so gut-wrenching to watch as you just watch the tragedy unfold where he can't give up his pride. And as he makes just a little bit of progress, he doesn't really give up his pride. He's humbled by Jimmy revealing information about him, so he has to accept certain things. But he himself can't accept the consequences of his state, the consequences of his choices, and tries to pretend like he's the guy that he was before, and bucks up against Howard to the point that he burns that bridge. And then he can't even have any moment to have compassion for his brother, any amount of brotherly love, friendly love, none of that. Final act, final conversation he has with someone is burning a bridge. And the season ends. So for me, I feel like this season, like I said, where things really pick up, where it moves very quickly. This whole plot line with Chuck and Jimmy, like I thought that the trial was like episode 7, 8. No, it's much earlier than that, and that's much more involved with what takes place in the descent of Chuck and how he spirals out of control. And then everything that happens with the drug world, with so many more people being moved in, every episode has big impact and progresses things forward in a big way, leading us to where things will be eventually. So that's my take on it. Of the first 3 seasons, I think this is easily the best of the bunch. Let me know what you thought down below. Check out more of my Breaking Bad verse content right there. Check out Cody Leach's review right down there. And thank you so much for watching. Bye-bye.